Welcome back to Giant Talk, the world's first OKR podcast in partnership with Coan, the dedicated OKR platform. And today you're joining us for episode 3 of our first series refresh. I'm joined again by Roger, and for those people that don't know, which probably isn't many listeners now, can you give us a brief introduction?
These introductions are just going to get shorter and shorter, aren't they? So I'm the Chief Giant, and I set up Derby Giants about 10 years ago. We've been focusing on OKRs for about 6 years now. Work with clients ranging from, sort of smaller founder-led enterprises that perhaps are experiencing rapid growth through investment and so on, through to much more mature organisations that are looking to recover and rebuild some of the agility perhaps that they've lost. It's a really exciting time. COVID's ironically actually presented us with a lot of opportunities, and we've seen a lot of growth over this period. So it's good to see that OKRs are gaining traction, because I genuinely believe it's a win-win for both the business and the teams and the people. It's not one at the expense of the other if they're done well. If somebody follows our methodology, they will be done well.
Great, thanks, Roger. And just briefly, as you know, I'm Jenny and I'm Giant Talk host. And today we're talking all about pilots or big bangs. So first off, what's the difference?
So this is about how you choose to set up OKRs, because there's two choices really. You can run a pilot. So that you find a particular part of the organisation that you maybe decide to run it in, so that you can kind of do this, try it on for size, learn from it before you share it with others across the organisation. Or you can go, as the name suggests, big bang, which is roll it out to all those that would be working on OKRs in one go.
In terms of TBG and kind of our preference, how would we align to those options?
Most of the time, we would advocate a pilot, but this does depend on the size of the organisation. In our recent OKR reports, the global report that we published, we looked at the capacity for change in organisations depending on their size, and we found that smaller organisations of, say, 100 people or less tend to have the capacity to absorb rapid change a lot more easily than larger ones, and they had a preference more towards going big bang. So that's fine. We're not saying that's wrong at all. But in terms of larger organisations, where not everyone might necessarily fall into the scope of OKRs, not everyone might do. It's only those that are focusing. If you listen to the previous episode, we were talking about KPIs and OKRs. I made the point about OKRs being really, really good at focusing on and measuring activity that drives growth, change, innovation. Yeah. And not everyone in a business, certainly a large organisation, has the ability to contribute to those. So that's why, even though we say big bang, it doesn't necessarily mean everyone across the organisation gets OKR'd up. It's only those that can contribute to one of those three things that I've just mentioned.
So you mentioned there about kind of smaller companies maybe being able to go more big bang. Is there any kind of industries or any areas that might prefer to go big bang?
Well, I think it's got a lot to do with mindset, to be honest, and that's about sort of culturally how much of a shift is required, or how much of a leap is required, should I say, to take on OKRs. And what we see is that, unsurprisingly, because OKRs grew out of the tech sector, and the tech sector, certainly software businesses tend to have quite an agile mindset anyway, because they're already very much structured in an agile way to focus on their development projects. And so therefore transitioning that thinking over to the way they run the business and not just the way they run their projects is not too much of a stretch. But then you've got mature industries, like, for instance, we worked with a large mining and minerals company down in South Africa last year, and they were far, far more steady in their approach to change. We worked with a very large bank in Argentina towards the end of last year, and they were exactly the same. But we're talking there about organizations of thousands of people. And that's the major difference. That's the major difference, I believe. And, there is a distinct challenge there around managing the change, so being correct and timely in the communications and messages and dialogue and so on and so forth. Because if you get that wrong, OKRs, like any change initiative, will just not work. People won't buy into it.
So if an organisation listening to this does think they want to go big bang, does this mean that there's no room for pivot later? And how could they kind of do this, I guess?
Only so much goodwill in the bank across the business at any one time. And if you burn through that goodwill by trying to do big bang and it doesn't quite work, you might have burnt through some of that goodwill. And so therefore, if you're going to say, actually, rather than, and to some extent, this is where we've come in the past with clients who have tried to go big bang. I mentioned when we were talking about OKRs versus KPIs, some of our clients that invited us in had actually applied OKRs to every single piece of activity in the business, and that's definitely big bang. What we ended up doing was kind of helping them kind of roll back from that and redefine the scope and the focus of OKRs to that focus on growth, change, innovation. And so therefore, the ownership actually moved within the organization. I'm thinking one example where it moved from HR into the strategic planning team in terms of the ownership of OKRs as a process, not the OKRs themselves, but the process. And that whilst you can't really say that then became a pilot, because the OKRs were already live, common parlance in the organisation, people had a reasonable understanding of OKRs, but then that was the pivot that they made. They kind of went, you know what? We tested them, okay, in a big way, but we tested them. They didn't quite work for us, so we've learned from that and we've redefined the scope of it. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say that was necessarily a pilot, and I don't think it's probably right to call it a pilot because you're already committed to them and they're already running, and you've learned from it. So you might actually say, in that particular scenario, going big bang was unknowingly the pilot, because you've ended up having to learn and adapt from it. So I hope that kind of rambling made sense, but yeah,
very much so. So you mentioned a little bit there towards the end more about pilots, and I just want to dig into that a little bit. So if someone wants to run a pilot, should it be done just down to one function or just down to one layer of the hierarchy? I know I mentioned that word. And what about cross-functional working, and how can this happen in a pilot?
Okay, so the scope of a pilot, it rather depends on the appetite of the organisation, and also I think you should be looking for where you're likely to find your early adopters and your innovators in the organisation. So it comes back to the point I was saying before about mindset, and how much of a leap is it going to be for people to adopt OKRs versus how they've been previously working. So if you have, for instance, in an organisation, a very defined sort of technical area, I'm not going to say function, but sort of technical area, it's possible that it might be the sensible choice to run an OKR pilot in that. Fine. If you're perhaps an organisation that doesn't necessarily have that, and by technical, I don't mean like support, IT support. What I mean is IT development, project-orientated work. Yeah. If you're an organisation that perhaps hasn't got that, and you're wanting to eventually use OKRs across a number of different activities in the business, then I think what's worth doing is it's worth looking at your strategy and the priorities that emerge from that strategy, and then maybe choosing one of them and saying, right, we're going to run an OKR or a few OKRs that are going to help to focus activity on this priority for the next 3-6 months. Now, I've specifically not said that functions come into this, because what I would recommend is, if you're going down that route and saying priority, the next question you should ask is, rather than what can each function do to then support this, is to ask, right, who is it we need to contribute to this? Where do they need to come from? What are the expertise we need to form, on the team or teams to support this priority that we have? And that's, that comes into your third question about cross-functional working, because that's how you start to build up the cross-functional teams. Your strategic priority, which perhaps has a company level OKR that defines the long-term outcome that wants to be achieved there, and then you've got a number of cross-functional OKRs supported by cross-functional teams which align into that, which may be on, say, a 3 or a 4 month cycle, depending on what your shorter cycles are, and you work through a couple of cycles on those and make sure you're doing retrospectives to learn how the process is working for you. And that can really inform then how you might then apply that same way of working to the other priorities, because I'm sure with more than just one, but to the other priorities within the plan, and then expand OKRs out.
Koan is a purpose-built solution for managing your OKRs, helping your teams achieve their objectives, getting them aligned, and absolutely helping them stay engaged. Sharing spreadsheets simply doesn't scale when you're trying to grow a business. With Koan, you can scale OKRs across your entire company whilst keeping the teams motivated and moving in the right direction. Now, Lawrence, there's lots of things we love about Koan, but tell me one of yours.
So I've got to say, one of my favourite things is that Koan just allows you to have a bit of fun with the OKR process.
Yeah.
In series 2, I think it was episode 3 of this podcast, we actually spent about half an hour, 40 minutes talking about the importance of making OKRs fun for your team.
Yeah.
And Koan allows you to do that perfectly.
Yeah.
Even just things like adding a GIF to your reflections, add some real personality. And I think I probably waste far too much time each week looking for the perfect GIF, to be honest. But it allows that fun throughout the organisation, and that's something that's really important if you're going to keep people engaged.
You are known for having the best GIFs.
Thank you very much.
In the team, definitely. So if you would like to find out more about how to make OKRs fun whilst using a great system, then pop along to Koan, that's KOAN.co/giants, where you'll find also a great paper that we co-wrote with them on how to build accountability and collaboration using OKRs.
If someone's listening to this from an organisation, they think they're going to go for a pilot, is this not going to cause kind of increased tensions and frustrations and maybe complexity within the organisation, as everyone will be working towards different goal management systems? If they may be running a pilot, they've got another system in place at the same time?
Well, yes, you do assume that there is a goal management system in place already, and that is quite often not the case, because it's not really kind of recognised, or it hasn't started to be recognised as an important discipline until the past few years. But actually, what I've observed, and this is what I encourage clients to try and generate and gain leverage from, to help with from a change point of view, is with a pilot, you can start to kind of almost market that internally and communicate the successes, the green shoots that you're starting to see. Get some quick short videos about how people are finding that it's improving communication or improving transparency. I used to sit across from this person every single day, but I never understood what it was that they were working on, and now we're working together on these things. And these are, I'm not making these up. That's actually a quote from what I heard from a client from a couple of years ago. We're all part of the same team. We all sit around the same bank of desks, but we've never ever really understood what each other's working on. And now we feel like we've got some really good shared goals, and they're making a difference. So it's things like that which then start to build up the demand and interest from other parts of the business. So what you start to see is that the energy behind the change becomes more about a pull from the rest of the organization than a push from those that are wanting to kind of see the change happen. Yeah. So in terms of the tensions and the frustrations, I tell you where I have seen those. I've seen those at senior level, because what happens is often that if you're just running a pilot on a particular priority in the plan, that may only fall within the scope of like a couple of members on the C-level team or the exec team, and the others might be chomping at the bit. I want OKRs. I want OKRs to help to get people to focus in on my priorities. And that may be a tension, but I think that's a good tension, because that's a pull energy. That's a pull energy, which is great for change. Great for change.
Yeah, absolutely. So finally, for this episode, I want to come to you for some top tips, if that's okay. So first, kind of want to touch on top tips for a pilot approach and kind of what your headline top tips would be.
Yeah, so top tips for a pilot approach would be to look at the part of the organisation, like I said earlier, where your early adopters and your innovators are likely to be, because that's the low-hanging fruit in terms of the change aspect, and in terms of adoption, and in terms of evangelism to the rest of the organisation. So if you're running a pilot, if you're deciding what the scope of that pilot should be, think about who will get this, where will be the quickest and easiest win for us, because it's that real sort of positive feedback. It's that obviously, demonstration of impact to the rest of the organisation that is going to really help with the wider adoption. At the same time, though, that doesn't mean to say that you should take your change management for granted. You still need to focus on making sure that the communications and the dialogue are done at the right time, in the right order. That's what I would say for a pilot approach. Tips for a big bang approach. If you are going to go big bang, then I would absolutely say this is definitely where your change management has to be on point. You have to be clear about, at a high level, the steps that we always recommend are, the leadership have to impart and convince people of their vision for the change. So this is how, in this instance, how OKRs are going to make us perform better, us be better in whatever way we define as being better. If we do it, and by the way, if we don't do it, this is what the threat is. So there's a bit of carrot and stick in that. So unashamedly, you can leverage a little bit of the fear response there. But this is the consequence if we don't change, if we don't do this. And then making it very clear about what's in it for the people that you're asking to change. So, how's it going to make their job or their life easier in some way, shape, or form? And then once the change is starting to happen, really seizing on those first early signs of success, and being making sure that they're very visible, and building on that as well to with recognition and such like to make sure that there's more of it. Sounds really simple, sounds completely obvious, and you're probably thinking, why wouldn't we do this? But all too often, particularly when it comes to the Big Bang approach, the predominant leadership messages JFDI. So and that's just kind of like, oh, right, okay, yeah, fine. It's another initiative, is it? Yeah. So, that's what I'd say about the Big Bang approach. It's absolutely about your change management there.
Great, thank you. I think that's a really interesting point, and kind of around, you don't want it to be seen just to be another thing that's being brought in. So it's very much about that communication and feedback element of the process, and something that at Giant Talk we like to get your feedback as well. So thanks for joining me today, Rog, for that conversation. If you've got any feedback on the episode, feel free to drop us a note on social media. You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter, or email us at growth@therebegiants.com. And join us next time for our 4th episode in this refresh series, which will be all about where do I start? So where do I start with OKRs? So we hope you've enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Giant Talk.